to this day, I remember this moment in my kitchen, sitting at the table. It was morning hours. And all of a sudden, I realized that our children, yours, mine, these children, they are not just multilingual, but a lot of these kids are also multicultural. And what that means is that, for my kids, they transition between the cultures with complete ease. And for our children, there's nothing spectacular or strange or scary about, different cultures, because this is who they are. It's not just how they grow up, it's who they are. Like every single cell of their bodies is made out of different cultures, right?
Welcome to the Empowered Expat Woman Show, the place to celebrate your courage, inspire you to dream and play bigger, and support you in creating a truly fulfilled life across borders. I'm your host, Camila Quintana, and I believe your future is too important to get lost in translation. So, are you ready to make the most of your life abroad? Then let's get started. Hi, welcome back, my lovely empowered expat women. Today, we're going to talk about the topic of multilingualism and raising bilingual children, which is, I know, on so many of our minds. So I'm very excited to have an expert on the show today to talk about this with us. Bettina Gruber, welcome. A fellow Austrian, by the way.
Yes. Hi, Camilla. It's so nice to talk to you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yes, I'm really happy that you could make it. We arranged this on very short notice. So
we did.
And so maybe to start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about who you are, and about your multilingual journey?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. So as you said, I'm Austrian, and I grew up very traditionally in the Austrian countryside in the middle of the Salzkammergut, very picturesque scene, very, very monolingual. But language, like from very early on, language played a really important part of my life. So as soon as I, could read, I'd read anything that I could get my hands on, and I would, it would be my escape sort of to, dive into books and just, be in that world. And then, I started writing poetry in high school, that kind of stuff. So language was always really important to me. And I, in high school, actually, I didn't take so much to foreign languages. I loved French back then. I was really good at French without ever really studying for French. I was really good at French. But then after high school, I went to England for a few months, and then I did a 2-year tourism training in Vienna, where half the subjects were in English. We had French, Spanish, Italian. This is one of the reasons, or the main reason, why I chose tourism as my path back then, because I thought, I'm going to have many languages and I will get to travel. That was my line of thought. I wanted to go to university, to be perfectly honest, but I didn't, because the way I grew up, I thought, well, if I go to university and study, say, English, that would mean I'd have to become a high school teacher. In the world that I grew up in, nothing beyond that really existed. Like, it never crossed my mind that somebody would be teaching at the university, right? Like, these are jobs too, right?
Yeah.
So I went for tourism, and I did that for a few years. And but it didn't make me happy at the end of the day. And then I did a mediation training. And through the mediation training, it was a 1.5-year training, I rediscovered my love for linguistics. So at the age of 28, I quit my job and went back to university.
Wow.
And started studying linguistics. And that was the life changer for me, of course, right? I thought I'd give up traveling for that, leaving tourism. Quite the opposite was true, that because, while working in tourism, I traveled to Turkey, to Tunisia, and Greece. So these were the countries that the hotels were in that, for the company I worked for. But then once I started linguistics, and it turned out that this was going to be a more serious path for me, the traveling started again because there's conferences all over the world. Pre-COVID, people would travel to conferences. So I went to Spain. I spent a semester in Venice. Later on, I went to Utrecht in the Netherlands to do my PhD. And then I went on to Vancouver to do a semester there. So I did way more traveling. I saw much more of the world. And English became an integral part of my life because it's the main language of communication and linguistics. And especially as soon as you leave Austria and, go into the international realm, that's where it's English all the time, English.
Yeah.
My English was very solid at that point already with all the prior experiences I had. But I only really started living a multilingual life when I guess I moved to the Netherlands. I was, early 30s at the end of the day. And that's where I met my husband. And my husband, he's from Greece. He's a linguist too. He's from Greece, but he left Greece when he was 17. So by the time we met, he'd been out of Greece for a really long time. He had lived in the US for many, many years. He studied there, got his degrees there. So, English was his second language already, right? He doesn't have a Greek accent at all. If you meet him, you have no idea that he's Greek. He doesn't even look very Greek. So, it was clear from the beginning that English would be our main language of our relationship, our main language of communication. And at the University of Utrecht, everything was English anyways. Like everybody spoke English with each other. And then we had kids. And that's when my life started becoming trilingual at the end of the day, because my husband speaks Greek with the kids, which led to me picking up quite a bit of Greek.
Okay.
I knew some before already. There's a lot of languages I know bits and pieces of, like I said before, Spanish and Italian and French and Turkish. I know some Turkish, and I already knew some Greek. But it started getting more solid, right, when I heard it every day. So our kids are trilingual.
Right.
And
they speak German with you?
They speak German with me, mostly with each other. They speak German and Greek with their dad. That's a different story. They picked up English by hearing it from us, but it didn't become active in the sense that they'd speak it. But 2021, they started attending a bilingual school in Austria, which is English-German bilingual. And within, 2 to 3 months, all three of them spoke English, like they had always been doing it. It was amazing to watch, like even for us, being an expert on something, and you probably know that too, you're an expert on something and you know exactly how it works. But as soon as it comes to your own kids, A, you do worry, B, watching them actually master these skills, I still don't take it for granted. I'm still amazed by how they manage all this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I love it. It is so important. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that, or why would you say that multilingualism is so important?
That's a very emotional question for me. May I take you back a little at the first few. So when I became a mom, suddenly I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. My eldest is born 2012, so we soon hit the refugee crisis. Climate change was already a big topic at that time, right? And to be honest, with having this bundle of joy, but vulnerable bundle of joy in my arms, I felt like I studied the wrong thing and my entire path had been entirely wrong. I felt like I needed to become an environmentalist, an activist. I should have studied something where I can, save the world. I spent many nights awake and crying because I couldn't take it and I didn't know what to do. And then, after my third child was born, I knew, I wanted to do something with all the skills that I had and I wanted to work. And I thought, well, I had the idea of, supporting multilingual families all around the world. on their journey, because I knew that for many people it was really difficult, and for many families it was not as easy as it was for us. And I wanted to change that. And I thought, yeah, but still, climate change, and oh my God. And then I started business coaching with my still mentor to this day. And at the very beginning of the training that she does, she asks people, why are you doing what you're doing? And she made us watch this video by Simon Sinek, who I'm sure I admire him massively. And I watched this video by Simon Sinek. It's all about the why. And I started, without thinking about it, I just started writing everything down that came to my mind. And to this day, I remember this moment in my kitchen, sitting at the table. It was morning hours. And all of a sudden, I realized that our children, yours, mine, these children, they are not just multilingual, but a lot of these kids are also multicultural. And what that means is that, for my kids, they transition between the cultures with complete ease. And for our children, there's nothing spectacular or strange or scary about, different cultures, because this is who they are. It's not just how they grow up, it's who they are. Like every single cell of their bodies is made out of different cultures, right? And that's when it dawned on me, like these kids, that's what our world needs, right? These kids, we need to send these kids out into the world as strong human beings, proud of who they are, of where they've come from, of, they need to own whatever they have.
Yeah.
And that's when I suddenly realized, holy shit, sorry, but that's exactly how it felt. Like, holy shit, I'm exactly at the right place with the right skills at the right time. There is so much fear out there. There's so much worry out there. There is so much, discrimination out there. And, to me, discrimination at the end of the day is just fear. It's fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
But, look at our kids, look at your kids, look at my kids, these bright young people. Like,
yeah, I always say that these multicultural, multilingual children, they will be the real connectors of tomorrow.
Yes.
Connecting people, building bridges between countries and cultures and religions, and also, especially also with environmental topics, they will be the change makers. I have so much trust in this next generation. And I want to take us out of the responsibility, but I do believe that the world will look completely different when these children, would you actually say that multiculturalism and multilingualism is on the rise?
Well, the thing is, the latest numbers from the UNESCO from 2019, they say that 2 out of 3 children worldwide grow up with more than one language. 2 out of 3. Like, think about that, right?
The majority.
I think with the world becoming more global, with people becoming more mobile, having become more mobile over the past decades, yes, for sure.
Now, when it comes to raising bilingual children or multilingual children, parents have so many questions and so many insecurities. So what advice could you give them for being able to do this successfully?
So, if I'm allowed to only give one single tip, and then I need to shut up, I would say, do not ever, under no circumstances, stop speaking your language with your children. Yeah. That's step number 1. And this needs to be the step that you always, always, always come back to and that you stick to. Because at the end of the day, language is a, pardon?
Even if they respond in a different language?
Yes, absolutely.
Keep going.
Yes, and there's a very simple reason for that. Language, at the end of the day, is a cognitive process, right? It happens in our brain. All parts of language, except for, forming the actual sounds, of course, the actual forming is physical. But language processing, forming sentences, and that's the crucial part, understanding language. Like I speak right now and you decipher it, your brain needs to decipher it, and that's a cognitive process.
Yeah.
So as soon as you're capable of doing that, you already need to have a certain level of language competency in order to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say something to your child in, in your case, German, and they answer back, I don't know, what do they answer back? Spanish.
They're actually more solid in German, but let's just say
for the sake of the argument, they answer.
With me, my mom, she wanted to raise me bilingual with Spanish. She herself is bilingual, German and Spanish. And I would always reply to her in German. We lived in Vienna. And when I was about 4 or 5 years old, she just stopped because she was also bilingual in German. So for her, it wasn't, she had this option.
Yeah.
And it's a pity. So let's take this scenario.
That's the biggest mistake, right? She should have kept on speaking Spanish with you, so that the language stays active in your brain. Because as soon as your brain, processes the language, it's active, right? Yeah. The neurons are firing as soon as you understand it, right? Because the brain needs to work.
What you're saying is that parents who encounter this kind of scenario, which I know are many, where you speak to your children consequently in your native language, but they keep responding in a different one, know that the fact that they understand you already means they have a really good level of comprehension already. So it's a matter of time until they decide.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not that simple. No, it's not always just only a matter of time. There's many contributing factors that may change the dynamic. So I've been supporting families since 2019, and since 2020, I'm running group programs, long-term group programs. And those programs are especially for parents who have exactly these kind of difficulties, right? And what I found is that it's actually several pillars that you need to look at, and then you need to fine-tune. But that is different for every family, right? I mean, there are some general clues that I can give, but at the end of the day, it's different for every family what will make the difference. And, the important thing for me to say here is the difference is not you coercing your child, you forcing your child, you ignoring your child. That's not the difference. That is like the worst thing that you could do. Do not ever do that to your child. That's a breach of trust. That's essentially lying to your child. And aside from the fact that this can really seriously damage your relationship to your child, which to me, like, this has always to come first, like relationship first, no matter what, right? The other thing that can happen is it disrupts the relationship that your child builds with the language that you speak, right? If you constantly try to force your child to speak Portuguese at home, and you keep coming back at her and you're like, but you can't have the ice cream if you don't ask for it in Portuguese, or I don't understand you. I have no idea what you're saying just because you didn't speak Portuguese. Then there is a very high chance, of course, we can't be sure that it's going to happen, but there is a high chance that your child will feel it when this stupid Portuguese, I can't hear it anymore, leave me alone with it. And that's what we don't want. We want our kids to be proud and to love our languages, all of them. Yeah. So we need to make space for that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And when it comes to, just different scenarios that you mentioned, where you say every family is actually a unique case, right? There are some standard, call it guidelines or whatever, but then every family has their own dynamic and so forth. Are there actually scenarios where you would discourage a parent from introducing another language to their child? Like, I'm thinking maybe because the child is already exposed to several languages, or the parent is not a native speaker but would like to teach a language that they have knowledge of. What's your approach or your advice for that?
Well, again, this is two completely different scenarios, right? So it's different answers. So I'm going to try to, keep it very short. If there's already several languages in play, the question is always, what relevance does this additional language have for the life of the child, right? If it's highly relevant, then the child will pick it up. So the limit on the amount of languages that a child can pick up is not so much a cognitive limitation, but it's a time limitation, right? Because, unfortunately, you don't get an extra 24 hours for every extra language that you speak, which would be really nice, but we don't. So you have to cram all those languages into the same amount of time. And the amount of input, of course, plays an important role in the level of competency that the child can reach. So again, this is a very individual case. If you want to introduce an extra language and you have good reasons for doing that, by all means, or, check with an expert how you could do it. And then there's many, many questions that you need to look at and factors that you need to factor in, right? And the other question was,
if they're not a native speaker.
If they're not a native speaker, it's really funny because I think, so I have a podcast too, right? And I once recorded a podcast episode on, can I pass on a language that's a non-native language or none of my first languages to my child? And it's the podcast episode with the most hits.
Really? Okay, so that is the question.
Which was not my intention, right? But, that's the way it is. It really interests people. And I've actually started working with several families who want to do that. And so let's talk about the most common scenario, I think, where you learned the language at school, and then maybe later you lived in England for a year, or, you went to France for a semester or something like that, and you studied Spanish, and then you want to pass on Spanish to your kids with no family connections whatsoever, just because. Then the most important or the most crucial thing that you need to understand is that language is more than just a means of communication. So I highly recommend using your first or one of your first languages as the main language of communication, as the language of relationship, right? The language of bonding, with your child. That doesn't mean that you cannot introduce your child to French, Spanish, English, or whatever, because there's other ways to do that. You can start looking at books together. You can start singing songs in English, these kind of things, right? I need to open a parenthesis here. That's really, really important to me, because I work with a lot of parents who grew up bilingual themselves, and they want to pass on the language that's not their strongest language. And that's an entirely different book. It's an entirely different book, because then the language plays a much bigger role in the family. There might even be family members that the child will only be able to communicate with if he or she knows that heritage language. And you might not feel as strong, as confident in this other language, right? Please don't put it aside. Don't say I can't do that because I'm not good enough, because I'm pretty sure you're going to be good enough. And B, you can always improve your skills. Like if you have such a solid foundation already, nothing is keeping you for, improving that, for getting better yourself, for your kid, with your kid.
Yeah.
So these are two different scenarios, and it's important for me to keep these two apart.
Right. So multiple languages, if you really consider they're relevant to your child and you do have enough time, because time plays a role in how much input output they can get, and consequently how well they can learn this language. And then the second thing, if you are bilingual, even though it's your weaker language, there is this whole cultural and family context around it where you definitely encourage.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I support a lot of families, particularly on this topic. Yeah. So I over the years, I came to realize that the people I love working with the most are also the people who need my help the most, which are the ones who are struggling.
Yeah.
And it's often bilingual people who struggle with passing on a language, right. For instance, because they feel it's their weaker language. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. And that's such a good point that you just made, the stronger and the weaker language, right? Mm-hmm. I know before when I just had a baby, I remember people telling me, oh, children are like sponges. They will just pick up the language just like that, just because, right? And then my experience was completely different. I think it's really hard work. Maybe it also depends on how different the two languages are from each other. I don't know. Maybe there are languages that are more easily combined and taught. Maybe also some children have some more talent. I don't know. You can maybe speak to that. But what I just noticed, both in my own children and also in the other bilingual children that I got to know in our international school, there's always a stronger and a weaker language.
Yes, but for anybody, it's not just the children. Look at any given multilingual person at a particular point in life. That's the crucial part, at a particular point in their lives. And you will find different skill levels in the languages. So this idea of the balanced bilingual, it's an idea, right? Yes, I know some people who come very close to that, right? I like telling the story of a client of mine who grew up in Germany in a Polish family. And, she went to school in Germany. She did, she went to university in Germany. So her German was super strong, but at home with her parents, she would always speak Polish. Then she went to Poland. I think the plan was to only do it for a few months or a year, something like that. But what happened? Guess?
She fell in
love. The Polish guy. So she married a Polish man and she stayed in Poland with him. And when I worked with her 3 years ago, she felt like she had been at a point where her German and her Polish were almost equal, right? Yeah. So she could handle the same kind of things in both languages, more or less. Because if you'd been taught, biology, chemistry, history in German, and you never did that in Polish, you would probably still feel more comfortable talking about these topics in German than in Polish. But she felt like it was fairly equal. But that was 3 years ago. And I bet you, if I talked to her again today, she'd feel that her German had started declining a little, right?
Yeah. So just to summarize, maybe for parents who might be a little bit concerned about their kids having a stronger and a weaker language, even though they try so hard to really provide them with both, it's completely normal. Yes. There's nothing to worry about. It can change, it can shift. Then
it usually does, and it usually does for people.
Right. Okay, that's also really good to know. And yeah, the goal is probably not to become perfect at 2 languages, but just to have this native approach where you don't translate in your mind. It's just comes like from within, right?
I think the task that we have as parents is to give them the best foundation that we can give them according to our circumstances and resources. And that's different for every family. Do not ever compare yourself to other families, please. Compare yourself to your own progress or lack thereof, right? And you said something at the beginning of this topic that I would like to pick up again. And that's, you said, well, I thought it was going to be really easy for my child and they're like sponges. Here is something that's really important to know. For the kids, it's super easy. It is super easy for the kids. Just remember your infants, your toddlers, and think of everything they needed to learn, like, grab something, keep joint attention, eat, crawl, walk, all these things, right? And while they're doing that, their brain's exploding too, and they're picking up language and all sorts of other things like programs and how does that work, like, sequences and these kind of things. So for them, it is really easy. The people who it's not always easy for is the parents.
Right.
Yeah. We need
the time factor, like you said.
Yeah.
The resources, the support.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes, absolutely.
No one else apart from you to speak with them.
Yeah.
Things like that, right? Yeah.
And I have a very encouraging message for everybody. Like if you're, and today I'm super confident saying that because I've seen it so many times, and I've seen it in, from the Galapagos Islands to Kenya to Australia, I've seen it happen over and over again. If you're not happy with the way it is right now, I promise you there are things that you can change that will make a big difference. I cannot tell you which things these are, because we'd have to look at your situation individually, but it doesn't have to remain the same for like ever. Don't ever give up just because you think it's not going well, because you can always change it. And it's never too late. Like it's never, ever too late. Like you, Camilla, if you decided to, learn Japanese
French
right now, you're like, well, see there, I'm brushing up, I'm improving my Greek right now, right?
Yeah.
It's all possible.
I
It's never
also
too late.
find that the more languages you speak, the easier it becomes. It's just a certain way of thinking about language and grammar that just, right? It makes it easier, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And is there one thing, just to wrap this up, that you would say, dear parents, please do not do this, apart from you already mentioned forcing your child to speak the language or ignoring it when it doesn't? Is there something else?
So, aside from not coercing your child or, having high expectations, I would say don't make the languages a battlefield in the family. It's much more important that they're a natural part of your everyday life. And I know this can be tricky for a lot of families, but it is possible. I know it's possible. I see it over and over again. Sing songs with your kid, dance to the songs, read poems, do tongue twisters, make it playful. That's when people, human beings in general, learn the best, not just kids, but also us grown-ups. So, make it light and easy as much as possible, and not something that you fight over. Yeah.
Right. Wow, I love this conversation. It's so interesting. It's so relevant for myself, but also I know for so many other parents. So a final question I ask everyone: what does being an empowered expat woman mean to you personally?
That's a great question. Thank you. So right now, I am actually an expat woman as well, because, we usually live in Austria, but at the moment, we are in Greece. We came here to spend one semester here. And for me, I think it means to be, self-reliant. For me, it's important to make my own connections here where I am, like reach out to people and meet people outside the family. I found it much easier to be an empowered expat woman while I was single or, didn't have any kids at least, and exploring the world and roaming the streets. It's a very different experience going to a different country with 3 kids who are constantly, one of them is sick, unfortunately, too. But for me, it was still very important, to take time, take a few hours, and just roam the streets and get to know the place where I'm at, find my stores. Like I told you at the beginning, I was just making maki for my kids, right? But I'm in Greece, like find the ingredients, in Austria, I just go to the next supermarket and I pick them up. Here, it's not that easy. So, find the things that make you feel at home. Things maybe, that you're used to, but at the same time, be open to new things, like experience something different, try different food or, going out by yourself for a walk and exploring the neighborhood. And what I also like to do, and that relates to the language, I speak Greek to everybody everywhere. Like, it's wrong and I can't find all the words, but it's fun connecting with people. And, at least here in Greece, it's usually really welcomed and people are very friendly and love when you're trying to speak the language.
Great. I love that answer. And now finally, I'm sure so many people will be thinking, okay, I need some more advice. I need some more personalized advice because like we said, every family is so different. So where can people find out more about you, follow you, connect with you, and work with you?
Best way to reach out is by email, I would say. So I'll leave my email address with you, Camilla, I guess. And you can just pop it in the show notes, right? So it's bettina@dielinguistin.at. Still, that might change soon, but that's it for now.
Right. Also, something important to mention: you work with German native speakers. You work with
English speakers, yes, yeah. So most of the offers that I have that either pre-made courses, pre-recorded courses, and I have quite a few of those. And my big group coaching program, which goes on for 6 months, the Multilingual Momentum Club, that is only being done in German at this point. But of course, one-on-one, I work with people in English as well. I do it all the time. And I do have an English course as well for parents of little children. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email, and we'll find what will help you the most. I guess that's most important for me at the end of the day, that you get what you need at the stage of life that you're in.
Yeah, excellent. So go ahead, do reach out to Bettina. You will find all of her links and contact details in the session notes. And yes, with that, I thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your wisdom with us, and for enlightening us a little bit about this really complex but beautiful and so promising world of multilingualism.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Thursday.